Hey, this is Will from EDM Tips, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use Ableton Live 10 from scratch if you've never opened it before. This is for beginners, and I'm going to show you how to sequence your own beats, how to record your own audio, how to work with audio, how to use effects, how to use MIDI effects, and everything you need to create your own music and get it out there into the world. First, I'm going to summarize the different parts of Ableton and the different components you need to know, and then we're going to go and deep dive into each of them before I bring it all together and show you how to make a song at the end. Now, I've also included my free EDM Producers starter pack, so if you're interested in making electronic dance music like house, techno, drum and bass, future bass, or even pop, download that free pack and it's going to get you started. There's loads of free samples in there, 100% royalty free for you to use. There are also some cheat sheets to help you write chord progressions, melodies, loads of stuff like that, how to get you started on mixing. So make sure you download that for free below this video. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So when you first load up Ableton Live 10, this is the screen that you are going to be presented with. Now, I'm using Mac OS, but if you're using the Windows operating system, when I show you the keyboard shortcuts, just substitute Command, which is for Apple, for Control, which is for Windows, and they're pretty much the same apart from that. Okay, so Ableton is based in two modes. You've got clip mode like this, it looks like this. And you've got arrangement mode. And don't worry, we are going to go into each of these as well. But basically, clip mode is for recording loops and coming up with ideas and jamming. And then when you press tab and go into the arrangement mode, you can also press this little icon here to switch between the two modes. Then you can start building it out into a track, and the playhead moves from left to right as you'd expect. It plays each of the elements until you get to the end of your song. So at the top here, you have got the transport bar. And this has got stuff like play, stop, record. It's got the metronome and the tempo. And I'll show you what all of them do soon as well. And then this window here, which you can minimize and show again by pressing this arrow. This is the browser window. And you've got collections, categories, places, and it's how you basically find the sounds that you're going to use and compose your song from. It's also where you select effects from as well. And then this bar at the bottom here can be two things. It can show which instruments and effects you've got loaded in, and it's also where you can edit in your piano roll editor, which again we are going to go into very soon. Now, if you are just starting up Ableton for the first time, you've also got this little button here that's really useful. This is the tooltip thing. So if you click that button here and you roll over anything, it's going to give you a little bit of information about what it does, and that really helps if you're just starting out and you're trying to get your bearings on what these things are. Okay, so now after that we have got the mixer, and that is basically the volume sliders. You've got these send controls, which we're going to go into, but basically they send some of the audio signal over to these auxiliary channels. And I know it sounds a bit like, it might sound a bit gobbledygook to you at the moment, but don't worry, we will be going into them. This information here is how to route the audio. The default is routing audio to the master channel, and this is where all of the different instruments you have, they end up going to this master channel, and then this is your master volume here. Let's look at the transport bar first. Now, we don't need to go into every single control in the whole of Ableton Live. This is just a beginner's tutorial to get you up and running as quick as possible. So the first thing you want to notice is the tempo. This is displayed in beats per minute. So if we turn the metronome on and then press play, which is spacebar as a shortcut, you can hear it's the tempo of our track. And we can increase this by left clicking on this and dragging it up and down. Or we can click on it once and then manually enter a tempo, press return to make it happen. Now, this is the time signature. The chances are you're going to be producing music in 4/4. If you're not, then you can change the time signature there. And then, as I showed, this is the metronome button, which is very useful for recording things because it helps keep time whilst you're singing or playing an instrument. And if you need more of a count in before it starts recording, then you can choose it here. For instance, if I was to press record now, it's going to count 4 beats before it does actually start recording. And don't worry, I will show you how to record and explain all this as well. But now it's recording. So there was a 1 bar count in because that's what it's set to there. If you want to start recording straight away, of course, you can do no bars, but I do recommend 1 bar. It's a pretty good one to have there. And you can have the rhythm hit more than once on every beat as well. But this stuff is all best left alone if you're starting out. Okay, so this control here just follows the playhead. So if you are in arrange mode, say, and we zoom in and we press play, if we have this off, then the playhead will go out the screen. Now, if we turn this on, the window will follow the playhead. Simple as that. I'll just note that I'm zooming in by rolling over this dark bar here, holding left mouse button and then rolling up and down with my mouse, and that zooms in and out. These are simple: play, stop, and then record, and that will record into whichever track is armed, and I'm going to show you that very soon. Don't worry about these for the time being, we will get back to them, they're a bit advanced for now. In fact, the only other thing that you really need to see in this middle section is the loop control. So that will turn a loop on and off. So if you select an area of your track by left click and then dragging, hold Command and L in Mac or Control and L if you're using Windows, that will then loop that section. So let's just drag this loop brace here so we can change the length of the loop, and let's see what happens. It simply loops that section, and you can left click and drag that around to loop different sections as well. If you hold Command and L again, then it just turns it off, or you can click it. Okay, so that is all you need to know about the middle bit for the time being. And here we have got some more data. That's not really needed yet, but this will show how much CPU is being used. And this shows if your hard drive's kind of struggling. We'll get to these other points very soon as well. So that's the overview of the transport bar. So next, let's move into the browser window. And as I said earlier, this is where you find your effects and find the sounds that you're going to use in your track. And you have 2 different types of tracks in Ableton Live. You've got MIDI tracks and you've got audio tracks. And MIDI is where you can trigger an instrument like a sampler or a synthesizer, and you can program in or play in notes that it's going to trigger. And then audio is when you've actually got an audio sample that you can drag in, and it treats them differently. Now, to create audio or MIDI tracks, you can either press Command and T or Control and T in Windows, and that will create an audio track, or you can hold Command Shift and T, and that will create a MIDI track. Alternatively, you can go up to your Create menu at the top, Insert Audio Track or Insert MIDI Track, and the other type of track you can create is auxiliary channels, which I will show you a bit later. So let's go through these sections within the browser window one by one. First, you've got the search bar, and this is simply where you would write something in like piano, and it's going to show you all of the options for piano there. Then you've got these collections. Now, these are really cool. So you create these yourself, and you can just drag in your favorite sounds and instruments into these channels, into these collections. And you can have them in more than one collection. So I use these personally for different sounds, different instruments, and then different effects as well. So you can see that they've got different colors. And the way that you do that is if you go and find an instrument you like drum rack, for instance, you can see it's got this red tab here. You just left click and drag it into whichever collection you want, and you can rename those to be as useful as you like. So you could have one saying drums, you could have one saying pianos if you like. Next, you've got the categories, and this is default. This is what Ableton does automatically. So if you go to sounds, this is where you can preview your different sounds and then drag them in to a channel, or double click on them. It's going to create a channel for it. And now you can hear we've got an instrument in that channel. Next, you've got drums, and this is these are instruments as well. So if we were to drag one in, you just have a drum machine instead of, for instance, a synthesizer. So that's a bit of a weird one, but you get the idea. You know, you can drag and drop onto an existing instrument, and it will be replaced with the new one as well, which is quite a nice quick feature. So there's our drum machine. Now, instruments is just another way of organizing. These things are all organized in different ways, but they're pointing to similar things. So this is going by sounds. Some of these sounds might be in drum machines, some of them might be in synthesizers, some of them might be in samplers. Instruments will help you choose whether you want a sampler or a synthesizer or a drum machine, for instance. So if we load in a sampler, we can see there's no sample in there at the moment. We need to choose a sound. I'm going to show you how to do that, but really quickly you can press this little button here in the top of most instruments and it will show you all of the sounds within, and you can preview, you find the one you like, you can double click on it and it will just load it in place. But we'll get to that soon anyway, because we'll continue here. Next, we've got audio effects. Now, audio effects are applied to any instruments that comes before them. So if we just double click this top bar here, we can minimize that instrument, just gets it out of the way. It's still there, but we just double click the top bar to get it out of the way. And now these audio effects means that you can drag an effect onto a track after an instrument, and then control the effect. But again, we'll get to those very soon. And you've got MIDI effects. Now this is something different. This is where you can control the MIDI notes that you programmed in. Again, we're going to get to that. Max for Live is an add-on which allows you to do loads more cool stuff, loads of cool effects. That comes with Ableton Live 10 Suite. And then you've got plugins, and this shows all of your third-party plugins, and these are usually be synthesizers, samplers, and effects units. Third-party plugins just means plugins that aren't created by Ableton Live that you can buy separately and then load them in and use them in Ableton. You can see I've got quite a lot of them here, and again you can drag those into your collections to help organize them. Clips are a combination of either audio and MIDI with effects that Ableton has provided with Ableton Live. Now, I never use these, but you could if you wanted. And if you double click on one, you'll see the kind of thing that it is. Okay, so if you drag one into a new track, you'll see what it is. So this one happens to be MIDI. So if we double click on that, we can see this is the piano roll editor, which I'm going to show you how to use soon. But you can see that each of these different sounds, and if you press this little blue icon here, the headphones icon, you can hear each sound when you click on it with the left mouse button. I'm just going to press Shift and Tab to go back to the instrument, and you can see there's like a chain of effects after the instrument, and it sounds like this. I'm just going to solo it by pressing S. And if we choose a different one, for instance, let's see what's on this, drag it into a new track. That's another MIDI one. Again, it's got to have lots of effects after it, but they also have audio-based clips as well. So if we drag this one, for instance, you can see it's actually got audio information in it. I'm having to drag that onto a new track because this is a MIDI channel, a MIDI track, so audio can't be loaded into it. If you double click on the track header here, on the clip header, sorry, you can see this is audio information. I'm going to show you how we can use this as well. And it's got some effects after it too. So that's what these Ableton clips are. Now the samples is simply all of the separate samples that each of the sampled instruments have. So this isn't particularly much use because you could see how many there are. You know, if there's a piano sampler, then it's going to have lots of different piano notes sampled, and this is where you would find them all. Next we go on to places. And this shows all of the different Ableton packs that you may have downloaded. You can get loads for free on their website if you've bought Ableton Live. So you can see I've got the guitar and bass one. I've got orchestral strings and whatnot. And then similarly, you go into there and it's a similar affair. You can drag and drop the instruments into the appropriate types of channel, like a MIDI channel. I'm just going to turn solo off here so we can hear it. Then user library is your own library. There you can save your own presets and whatnot. Then you've got your current project, which is all the files within the project you are currently on. Then you can just add your own folders, like I've got drum hits from all over the place. So this is great for some extra organization. Okay, so now let's get into MIDI and audio. So I'm just going to delete some of these instruments that I've created, apart from this MIDI instrument here. And if we press this arm button, which is this red one, this means that when I play with my MIDI keyboard, this is the instrument that's going to play. And this is MIDI. So if I left click and drag, And if I press Command Shift and M, or in PC Control Shift and M, it will create a MIDI clip here. I can press Command and R to rename it, so I'll just call it bass. And you can do the same on your track name. You can hold Command and R or Control and R to rename it and then type it in. And again, it's Shift and Tab to switch between piano roll view and the instrument itself. So if I just select this, hold Command and L and loop it, and turn on the metronome, we've got our little loop. If we double click on the clip header, our piano roll editor appears, and we can start programming in notes. Now if you hold Command and press 2, it changes the grid. So from 1/4 to 1/8 to 1/16 to 1/32, etc. It's making the increment smaller, so it's easier to program in. So we can either program something in by double clicking and dragging where we want it. And then we can use the cursor to move it left or right or up and down. And I'm duplicating it by holding Alt and then left clicking and dragging. And then we've got this little loop. Now if I want to make a change to that, I can make sure that this loop button is pressed on, and then I can just drag and drop that loop. I can drag the end of it in the arrangement view, and it's going to bring it out as far as I need because it's looped. So I'm just going to change the loop brace as well. And then I can click on that once, hold Command and J, and it consolidates it, and it makes it now one loop there. I can loop that if I want, but the reason I've done that is so I can change the second half of it. I've just taken out the last note. So that's working in MIDI. And then these instruments controls here, or rather these MIDI controls, are how you alter this. So I'm just pressing Command and A to select all the MIDI notes, and if you press legato, you can see that it now lengthens these notes so there's no gap in between them. And if I press Command and Z, it undoes that. Now the other way to create MIDI is to record it and play it in. And if you choose a MIDI track and then press this arm button, when you then hit record, this is the track in which your MIDI notes are going to be recorded. So if we go and pick a piano sound, for instance, or an organ, something like that. So we'll just go to sounds. We will go to, I guess, vintage. And let's see if there's an organ in here that we like the sound of. Here's one. So I'm just going to drag that into my MIDI channel. And now if we press the note, we can hear it. So now let's record it. We've got the track armed, we've got our organ sound, and we just need to make sure that the playhead's at the beginning by pressing stop, and then we can press our record button here. So I've just recorded that in using my piano keyboard, my MIDI keyboard. So if we double click on that clip, we can see this is the MIDI information. Now what you can do if you play something in and it's not quite as you want, I've just dragged this up with left mouse button. This is the velocity control. Velocity is a way of controlling different parameters of a sound, a MIDI sound. Don't worry too much about that, it is a bit advanced, but I'm just going to press Command and A or Control and A on Windows to select everything, and I'm just going to drag up these velocities. So in this instance it's going to make it louder. So I'm going to turn down the volume here a bit. And the next thing I'm going to, and there's no particular reason I've done that, it's just to show you what velocity can do, and you can assign the velocity to different things within the instrument. But again, this is a bit too complex for this tutorial. So the next thing I am going to do is select everything again, right click, and then I'm going to go to quantize settings. Now, quantizing is when you draw something back onto the grid. If you do it 100%, it's going to pull everything right in time. So if I press OK, you're going to see these notes moved. Now some of them have moved to the wrong place, so I'm going to have to kind of move them manually. Just by dragging, grabbing them and moving them. So if you want that really exact sound, then quantize is the way to do it. Or you could quantize it to perhaps 60 or 70% and it'll just drag it more or less in place. But the more you quantize something, you know, the less human it's going to feel. Okay, so that is how you can get MIDI in without programming it by clicking on the piano roll editor. Okay, so let's have a look at audio and how it differs from MIDI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one of my places and I'm going to load in a piece of audio from a sample pack. So I'm just going to, again, left click, drag it onto an audio channel. If there are no audio channels already created, you can just drag it below everything else and it's going to create an audio channel automatically. And Ableton works really well with audio because if you double click here, you can actually warp the audio and then it's going to stay at the same tempo as your project, no matter what tempo it is. And this is one of the things that set Ableton apart from all other DAWs when it first came out. Now the others can do it too, but this is one of Ableton Live's main features. So the best, I won't go into all these details because again, this is only for beginners really, but just suffice to say, this is the warp algorithm that you can choose here. Beats is best for drum beats usually, and then Complex Pro is best for things that have fewer transients but have notes to them. So singing, for instance, or perhaps a chord progression, it's best to warp that usually with Complex Pro. Now you can move these warp markers manually, which is really useful for things like vocals. So I'm just going to hold Command and T, create a vocal track there, and I'm going to go to some vocals that I might have, and let's just choose something. We'll choose this, drag it in, and you can see the audio information here. I'm just going to stretch the loop bracket out. I'm going to just drag out my drum loop, and you see we've got loop selected here, so it's just going to loop for as long as I need it, like this. And I'm going to reduce the volume a bit so we don't get any clipping. And I'll turn off the metronome. And again, the vocals are going to be kept in time with the track, except I choose Complex Pro because it's going to make a smoother warp on those vocals. But now they'll stay in time with the track too. Like that. So now both these things are 123 BPM. And if I move these warp markers by double clicking on them and shifting them, you can kind of come up with some cool effects and get the vocals to sit exactly where you want them to in terms of timing. So that's what these warp markers do. So that's how you can work with audio that already exists by dragging it in. But what if you want to record your own audio? So you create an audio track by pressing Command and T or going up to create audio track here. And then we need to make sure that we've got some kind of input device like a microphone. So the way we do that is by going up to Live and then pressing Preferences and then go to our Audio tab and make sure that we have an input device and a microphone. So now you can see there's an input coming in here. So now when we arm this track and press record, it's going to do the 4 beat count in as we set earlier on the metronome, and then we can start recording into this. This is how you record into Ableton Live 10, Live 10. So my singing's rubbish obviously, but that's not the point. And now you can hear this is our audio that's been, this is how you record into Ableton Live. So I'll just cut out the last bit because I didn't like it by selecting it and pressing delete. And then you can do a little clip fade. And of course, if you did want to kind of tweak the timing, you can double click and then we can set our warp markers. So I'll double click there and I'll double click there. And then we can tweak things into timing like this. This is how you record into Ableton. So I might want the Ableton there. So the way I'm creating a warp marker each side is to hold down Command and then double click, and it's going to create one there, and then the one in the middle. Now I can tweak this without moving everything else. This is how you record into Ableton Live. And I'd probably choose Complex Pro because it's a vocal. And that is how you can record instruments. That is how you can record vocals into Ableton Live 10. Let me know what you think of this so far, guys. If you're finding it useful, give me a hell yeah in the comments below. So now let's have a look at audio effects and MIDI effects. So first we'll look at audio effects. We want to apply some to this, this vocal here. So if we go to audio effects here and we put something like, say, a reverb on the channel, we can either drag it here onto the clip and it's going to show up in our channel, or we could drag it directly into the channel, or we could drag it here over onto the track name there. And then we use the dry wet control, as we discussed earlier, to feed the amount of the effect on that we want. So this is with no reverb, and then this is adding reverb. And we can use all the controls to tweak the reverb, like decay time and all these other things that we won't go into because it's only a beginner's tutorial. And then as you add more effects on, you chain them together. So you could add after that, for instance, a phaser. You could add some LFO so it moves. And then you could feed just some of the phaser into this signal. So this would be fully on and half on. So that's how audio effects work. They chain together, after which they go into the channel, after which they usually would go to the master channel. Now the other way to use audio effects is on these auxiliary channels or return tracks, and you can create them by going up to create, press insert return track, or you can press Alt, Command and T, and that will create another one. But the default set comes with 2, and they already have Ableton already loads a reverb onto one and a delay onto the other. And the difference between this is, rather than being on the channel, you can feed a certain amount using these send knobs on the mixer, and you can access them in here as well, see, on the arrangement view, a certain amount to each of these effects. So we can feed some of the reverb from the vocals through to the reverb. Tweak the reverb, and it's 100% wet because we only want the wet. We want it 100% wet because we don't want some of the dry signal to be sent through to this extra channel as well, because we've already got it here. And that using these means that we can feed other elements into those same effects. So we could feed some of the drums in as well. It's kind of like a shared effect, if you will. So you can hear the drum has reverb on it too. And delay on another channel, so we could feed some of these drums into the delay. And we can also feed some of the vocals through to the delay. And the beauty of using auxiliary channels is then you can use effects on those as well. So you might want to drop in an equalizer. Again, you can find that in audio effects, but I've just added the shortcut in my collections. And then you could roll off some of the low end frequencies from the delayed signal. So this is just the delay here. And that's the beauty of auxiliary channels. You'll be wanting to use those a load. Okay, next we are going to look at MIDI effects. So I've just drawn in a bit of a MIDI pattern here using a marimba sound. And the way I did that was exactly the way we looked at earlier, which is programming it in the piano roll editor and by searching for a sound here in our categories section. So this is what we have. Now we want to apply some MIDI effects to that. So if we listen to it with the rest of our track, you can see we're clipping a bit here. So I'm just going to grab all of these three and then bring down the volume, all of them together, so we're not clipping. So let's look at these MIDI effects and what they can do. And there's several to choose from, but MIDI effects actually affect the keys, the notes that we're playing. So if we go into MIDI effects, we've got things like an arpeggiator. So let's have a listen to see what that does. And it's worth noting that MIDI effects happen before the MIDI instrument in the chain, whereas audio effects happen after the instrument or the audio. And it will basically repeat notes and play notes, and you can change the key and you can have it play interesting steps. Now you can't apply these effects to audio, it's only MIDI that you can apply these to. So you can also change the pitch just by notching it up and down. So that's what the MIDI effects do, and of course there are these other ones that you can play with as well. Now before we move into clip mode and I show you how to use that, we are going to look at a couple more things in arrangement mode. First is groove, and you can use the groove pools in clips as well, so bear that in mind. But if you click this little double wavy thing here, then it opens up the groove pool, and if you right click, press Browse Groove Library, you can choose between these different grooves. Now the one I usually use, and the one I'm going to use for the sake of this example, is MPC 1664, and you just drag it into your groove pool and you can see it's got these different controls. Now what this does is change the timing of your track. Let me show you an example. So in this MIDI track here, we are going to apply some groove to a hi-hat loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load a sampler, and I'm going to choose one of my drums from one of my packs. I'm going to choose a closed hat like this. So I'm going to drag this sample into my sampler, and then I'm going to tweak this little control here so I can get this sample starting from where I want, which is right here at the first transient. I'm going to double click on my MIDI clip, and I'm going to program in my hi-hat loop. So if we have this on and turn off solo up here, we should be able to hear our hat. So I'm going to draw this in on 16ths, and I'm going to just draw 4, select them by holding the left mouse button, then hold Command and D or Control and D in Windows to just duplicate that the length of this clip. So now this is what we have. Very simple, repeating hi-hat. Now if we drag this groove clip onto our hi-hat, listen to the difference it makes. It's now given it a shuffle. And that's what groove does, and you can actually apply it to audio as well, so we can apply it to these drums, although drums using groove clips with audio tends to be less successful. You have to be more careful with it. I'll turn off the auxiliary effects on that just to make it easier to hear. And if we turn this global amount to 0, this is kind of like the dry wet knob on the effect. So this is with no groove, and this is with 100%. It's easier to hear on the hi-hat. So this is with 0 groove on the hi-hat, and this is with 100. So that's what groove does. It just adds some human swing to your track. And whichever channel or whichever clip you want to apply groove to, you have to drag this groove clip onto, like so. So that is groove. The last thing I want to show you in arrangement mode before we move into clip mode is automation. Now I know this is kind of not completely basic, but I just give you a little taste of what it is. If you click this little icon here, you open automation mode, and that means you can change the parameters and or the values of certain things over time. So if we have our vocal here, we're going to put an audio effect on there, and we're going to put the filter. So I'm just going to drag it and drop it down here. And now we can control the filter cutoff. Like so. And I'm just holding my mouse button and then dragging it. Now if you right click on this and press show automation or show automation in new lane, you'll see this little thing pops up, and you can grab it with the left mouse button, drag it down to kind of zoom in a bit. And automation is controlling this value over time. So I'm going to click once there to create a node. I'm going to click once there to create a node, and I'm going to drag it up like this. And now listen to what happens over time. I'll go back to the beginning and watch this filter. So that is what automation is. In terms of up on the transport bar, there is a button here which is for recording automation. So now I can press record and make sure that this track is armed, like so. Turn solo off. And if I press record, now I can actually do this manually and it will record it. So I'm just going to delete this automation by right clicking, like so. And if I select this and then press record, I'm going to be able to record this. And I'm just dragging up and down with my left mouse button there. So by having this little button here, you can see it's recorded the automation as well. Now let's move into clip mode. If we press tab, we can go from arrangement mode back to clip mode, and we can start from scratch, or we can drag what we've already created into these clips by holding the appropriate clip with the left mouse button, pressing tab, and then dropping it where we were working with it before, like the same channel. So these are kind of a vertical representation of our tracks, and this is a horizontal representation of our tracks. And this is important for some very good reasons, which I'm going to show you. So first, I'm going to drag these back into clip mode, like so. And I'm going to name them a bit more usefully as well. So I'll just call this hat. I'll call this marimba. I don't know if it's technically a marimba instrument. I'll call this drums. And I'll call this vocals. And you can change the color of them if you want by right clicking, choosing nice colors like that. And you can also right click and assign the track color to all the clips within that track as well, which is quite nice. And you can do the same here. So if you were to right click, press assign track colors to clips, you can color your project nicely, and it's just easier to keep on top of things and know where they are. So I'm just going to do that quickly. Select them, shift and click, right click, assign track colors to clips. So now we've got this these different loops, and this is just going to loop around. You can see they will loop by the length of the clip that they are. So if I double click on that, you can see this little clock here shows the length of the loop, and then it's going to start again, same as these ones here. So now we're in clip mode. This is really for jamming and coming up with ideas, and then we can move into arrangement mode. I decided to do it this way around because I usually just work straight into arrangement mode, but lots of people I know do work in clip mode first. Now you can record straight into clip mode, or you can drag loops and whatnot straight in there. So for instance, we could drag that in. Whoops. Now it's asking me to do this because I've dragged an audio file into a MIDI track, and it's trying to ask if I want to convert it into MIDI material, but we don't want to do that. We want to create our own audio track by holding Command T, and then we can drag in that and it's going to work as we would hope. Now, when you press play on any of these, it's going to play all of these clips. And it was causing some clipping there, so I'm just going to grab them all and turn them down a little bit, like so. So we've got what's called headroom here and it's not clipping. Now we are going to use these cool things called scenes, and they're in the master channel only in clip mode. And that's these little things here. And this is how you can sketch out your track. So let me give you an example. If I press play, it's playing all of these clips simultaneously. However, if I only want some of those clips playing, I might say right click on this first scene, duplicate it, and it's going to create the exact same thing. Now, however, I might decide that I only want the marimba to come in on the second scene. So I can click on it, press delete. I might do that with the big drums here as well. And now I can jam out an idea. So I could call this, I'll click on this scene, Command R, I'll call this intro, and then Command R, call this verse. Doesn't matter what you call them, whatever works for you. Now I can press this and just switch between the two. And again, you could duplicate it, and then the next you might want to take all the drums out. And then you've got this, which you could call break. And of course you can still add these send effects and drag on normal audio or MIDI effects whilst you're in clip mode as well, absolutely the same as before. So let's add a bit of this delay to this marimba. And I'm going to go to that delay and I'm actually going to put it in ping pong mode so the sound jumps from left to right. And that's how you can kind of work out a nice structure for a song. And the way you then take that into arrangement mode, if you want to do that, and you'll see it's all grayed out at the moment because we're not following the arrangement that we'd already programmed in. We're just working with clips at the moment. So this little button has turned on to show us that we're just using the clips at the moment. But what you can do is you can press record and then you can actually start just jamming in like this. Oh, it's worth noting you have to make sure that loop is turned off here. Otherwise, it's not going to record into the arrangement mode. It's just going to record the looped area of the arrangement mode, which would be this, which would really annoy us after all our hard work. So we make sure we got loop mode turned off. Then we press record and it's going to count in 4 beats as we set to the metronome earlier, or as is the default. So let's do that. And we're just going to hit these scene buttons as and when we want them to come in. And that's going to help sketch out an arrangement. And it'll keep it all in time nicely. And then we could go back to the beginning. And whilst it's playing, you can actually click and hold Alt and drag down duplicates. So you can kind of jam as you go. So we just want beats next. So we can go to this new scene here. And now let's see what's happened in our arrangement view. So we'll press Tab, go back to it. You can see here that it's basically copied or recorded the arrangement that we've just played. Now it's all grayed out at the moment because we're still effectively playing with the clips. So if we just click this little orange button here, it's going to commit it to our arrangement. So you can see now this is our arrangement. And then we can, we can move and tweak things here. We can add the automation that I was talking about earlier. So we can do that over time on our vocals. I'm just pressing delete because I've got multiple tracks of that same parameter that come up. So that is how you can use clip mode and arrangement mode together. Okay, so we've got our basic idea. I'm just going to bring it all together. I'm going to create a bass line to go with this. I'm going to do a tiny bit of mixing quickly. I'm going to reorganize my tracks by dragging and dropping into the order that I want. So I'm going to choose all the, make all the drum sounds green, just because that's how I like to work, and put them at the top. And then we are going to create this into a little tune, and we've got some effects that we'll put on it as well. So first thing to do after this is create a bass line, because it's going to be really important, because it's music and music likes bass lines. Fact. So let's just create a MIDI channel. I pressed Command Shift and T to create that. Now I'm going to rename it Command R. Let's call it bass, and let's choose a MIDI instrument for this. So we can go to our instruments here, our sounds, go to bass, preview some of them. This one's quite cool, so I'm going to drag and drop that. And I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard, but you could, of course, program this in. I'm going to color it yellow for bass. And now I'm just going to jam a few ideas out. You could do this in clip mode as well, of course. In fact, I'll show you how to do that. So we'll just play this here. So I'm just playing that on my keyboard, and now I've got an idea I like. Like that. I can just make sure my bass is armed here. Now I'm going to press one of these record buttons. If I press this one, it's going to play these other clips with it. If I press this one, it'll only play these clips with it. So I might just do it with the these ones, because it's going to be less confusing to my ears, because there's just beats going on here. So if I click this, it's going to automatically set this button to recording. And now I press stop by hitting spacebar, and then but because I've already recorded in this arrangement, which I like, and it's all grayed out again because we've been playing with the clips, I'm just going to turn this button off here, because we don't want to change the arrangement we've got. And I'm just going to grab this bass, left mouse button, press tab, and I'm going to drag it into my arrangement view. Perfect. There we go. I can double click on this, and I could tweak the timing a bit. I could use quantize, I could change the velocity, I could drag the notes around a bit. And if I wanted to record over that, if I wasn't happy, I could just record, and it's going to record over it. And if I don't like my new recording, I can always hold Command and Z to go back to the old one. Now, if you click this button up here, this little plus, when I record, if I want to record over this bass, it's going to keep the old notes there as well. So it's like an overdub, it's called. Now it sounds funny because this instrument is monophonic, which means only one note can play at a time. But you can see that it's recorded in the new bass line I played as well. But with a bass line, you'd usually only want one note playing at a time. So I'm going to double click. I'm just going to quantize it all by right clicking press quantize, or you can go into the quantize settings if you want to tweak them again, but I'll just fully quantize them. And now the bass line should be in time with the rest of my track. Great, so I'm going to select it all, I'm going to hold command, drag up on one of these notes to make the velocity of all of them the same, just so it's a bit more of an even sound. I'm going to make sure that I apply this groove to the bass too, so it doesn't sound out of time from everything else. And then I'm going to add a filter to this with audio effects, take out some of the high frequencies. I'm going to increase the release so it's a bit smoother. Like that. And again, I can just easily press solo to do that. Add some reverb to the marimba. Add some more effects to the vocals. And what shall I add to that? I think I will add a bit of phaser. And that is how I would build this out into a full track, making sure to use things like equalization to make sure that the frequencies don't fight, and so on and so forth. So let me know what you thought of this tutorial. Did you find it useful? Don't forget to download my free EDM Producer Starter Pack below. As I said, there are 100% royalty-free samples for you to use. There are cheat sheets that are going to help you write chords and melodies and awesome bass lines, and also help with your mixing too. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this big fat thumbs up if you like it, and share it with anyone that you think will find it useful. Thanks for watching, and until next time, cheers and happy producing.